Let us rewind to a moment in American history when the country actually believed it could end poverty, not just reduce it. Not just manage it, end it. This isn't some fairy tale. It was the 1960s. The economy was booming, the middle class was strong, and a bold vision was emerging from the White House. President Lyndon B. Johnson stood before the nation and declared an unconditional war on poverty in America. And for a brief, shining moment, it was working. But then came a political and economic shift that would undo much of that progress. And the consequences of that decision are still with us today. In the tents lining our streets, in the millions of children going hungry, in the hollowed-out promises of the so-called American dream. This is the story of how America tried to end poverty and then just stopped. In January 1964, LBJ gave his famous State of the Union address. He told the nation, "This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America." This wasn't just rhetoric. The country had the resources to make it real. The U.S. was at the height of post-war prosperity. But underneath that prosperity, about 1 in 5 Americans still lived in poverty. Millions of children went to bed hungry. Entire communities were trapped in cycles of deprivation. Johnson, who had grown up poor in rural Texas, understood poverty not as a personal failing, but as a structural problem, and he actually planned to do something about it. Out of this came the Great Society, a sweeping set of programs designed to uplift millions. It wasn't just one single program. It was a vision. The government launched Medicare and Medicaid, ensuring older Americans and the poor could get health care. It created Head Start, giving low-income kids a leg up in early education. It expanded food stamps, built affordable housing, and invested in job training. The Office of Economic Opportunity became the central hub for this war on poverty. And guess what? It worked. Between 1964 and 1973, the poverty rate in the United States fell from around 19% to about 11%. That's nearly a 40% drop in less than a decade. Millions of families rose out of poverty. Elderly poverty in particular was slashed, thanks to Medicare and Social Security expansions. Think about that. America, a country that often preaches personal responsibility, was seeing the direct results of collective action, and it was lifting people up. But history is rarely a straight line. The Great Society was born in an era of optimism, but also one of tension. The civil rights movement was in full swing, and at the same time, the U.S. was escalating its involvement in the Vietnam War. That war would become a turning point. Johnson believed he could fight a war abroad and a war on poverty at home. But soon, military spending started to dwarf social spending. Dollars that could have gone to affordable housing were instead funneled into Southeast Asia. Then came the backlash. Conservatives accused anti-poverty programs of being bloated and inefficient. Some white Americans saw the programs as primarily benefiting black communities, feeding racial resentment. Politicians began framing poverty less as a systemic problem and more as a moral one, blaming individuals instead of addressing root causes. By the early 1970s, President Richard Nixon was already scaling back the war on poverty. He shifted the tone, and the idea of government-led economic justice started to fade. Then came the real turning point. In 1981, a new president stepped onto the stage with a smile, a slogan, and a radically different vision for America: Ronald Reagan. He didn't just oppose big government. He redefined it. "Government is not the solution to our problem," he famously said. "Government is the problem." To many struggling Americans, this message sounded like freedom. Lower taxes, less bureaucracy. But behind the rhetoric was something far more deliberate. A war, not on poverty, but on the war on poverty itself. Reagan slashed federal funding for public housing. He cut food assistance and social services. In 1981 alone, federal housing assistance was cut by 75%. That's not a typo. 75%. The number of affordable housing units being built under federal programs completely collapsed. At the same time, Reagan deregulated the economy and slashed taxes for the wealthy, all under the promise that the benefits would trickle down. But they didn't trickle down. They pulled at the top. As wealth concentrated upward, safety nets at the bottom unraveled. This wasn't accidental. The 1980s saw a massive ideological shift. Poverty stopped being a collective problem and started being a personal failure. The image of the welfare queen, a racially coded stereotype Reagan pushed on the campaign trail, turned public sentiment against welfare programs. And the war on poverty faded from the national conversation. Meanwhile, poverty didn't go away. After falling steadily for a decade, the poverty rate stagnated. And homelessness, which had been relatively rare in the post-war era, began to surge. This wasn't because people suddenly got lazier. It was because the affordable housing market was gutted, wages stagnated, and the cost of living rose while support systems were stripped away. By the late 1980s, tent encampments started popping up in major cities. The urban homeless crisis became a media talking point, but it wasn't a mystery. It was the predictable result of pulling the ladder up just as millions needed it most. The war on poverty had shown what was possible. Reaganism showed what happens when that vision is abandoned. Of course, the story didn't end there. In the 1990s, President Clinton signed welfare reform, officially ending the federal welfare guarantee. It was framed as ending welfare as we know it. But what it really did was make poverty harder to escape by treating it as a matter of individual discipline, not structural issues like low wages or unaffordable housing. So where are we now? In one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world, about 37 million people still live in poverty. Over 650,000 people experience homelessness on any given night, and that number is rising. Many cities have more luxury condos than affordable housing units. These aren't natural disasters. They're policy choices. Choices to cut taxes for the rich instead of building affordable housing. Choices to subsidize corporations instead of childcare. Choices to police poverty instead of ending it. But here's the thing, the legacy of the Great Society isn't just about what was lost. It's also about what remains possible. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. briefly expanded the child tax credit. Child poverty plummeted. When that credit expired, poverty shot right back up. That's not a coincidence. It's proof that poverty is not inevitable. The same is true for programs like Medicaid, housing vouchers, and food assistance. Whenever they're adequately funded and accessible, they work. The problem isn't effectiveness, it's political will. The war on poverty didn't fail. It was abandoned. And the result of that abandonment can be seen in every encampment, every empty fridge, every family working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. But just as America once decided to fight poverty and succeeded, it could decide again. In the end, this story isn't just dusty history, it's a mirror. It shows us what happens when a nation decides to build safety nets and what happens when it rips them apart. It shows us that poverty is not inevitable. It's a choice. The question now is whether we'll ever choose to pick that fight back up again. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more conversations into the issues that shape our world. See you next time.